The world's great religions, such as Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism, often appear exclusive. They seem like parallel lines to share the same plane, but yet to remain separate and distinct. Our guest today on 4 Hour Times not only sees points of connections between religions, but encourages dialogue among them. He is an English Benedictine monk who now lives in the Hindu style in a Christian ashram. Father Paul Schneirla of the Antiochian Orthodox Church talks to Dom Bede Griffiths about his life and philosophy on When Parallels Meet, as they ultimately must, in infinity.
Dom Bede, in your autobiography, The Golden String, you describe your spiritual pilgrimage from agnosticism into Christianity and finally into monasticism, into the Benedictine order. Could you give us some details of those early years when the first changes took place?
Yes, it was really my experience at Oxford with 2 friends in particular. We left Oxford without any belief of any definite kind at all. The only thing we had in common was a love of nature, and we used to get out of Oxford into the Cotswolds, into the country, and explore, and that gave us some, it was an escape, but it gave us some sense of meaning in life. And then when we finally left Oxford, we made a great venture, and we went and took a small cottage in the country and started to live. We got a small cottage, we had some cows, we had a garden, and we really lived a country life for about a year together.
When you were at Oxford, I think that you say that C.S. Lewis was your tutor.
Yes.
Was him an influence on your...
Yes, it was very interesting. When I first knew him, he was practically the same as I was, vaguely agnostic. And really we discovered the Christian faith together through literature. He was my tutor, we were reading English literature, and this encounter with, say, Paradise Lost, various Christian books, and later on it came to Dante, this awoke this beginning of faith in both of us, and really it was a shared experience.
Yes, and after you moved out of Oxford and into this cottage, what we would call today a commune, I guess, somewhat before its time, then you began to move toward a more formalized type of religion,
yes,
which eventually led you into the monastery of Prynich.
Yes. Well, that was a very interesting arrangement, actually, because we were all interested in literature, and we used to work in the garden and the farm a bit, but then we read, and we started reading the Bible, and each one of us every day as literature to begin with. And then gradually the meaning of the Bible began to come through in this sort of rural setting, you know, where you had the shepherd and the sheep, and the whole biblical thing came to life. And at the end of the year, we were all realized it had a real meaning for us, and we were all beginning to pray, which we hadn't done for years and years.
And you found the life at Prynich a sort of amplification of this community life you'd shared with your friends?
Yes, in a way. You see, we broke up after a time, and then I went searching on my own a bit in the Cotswolds again. And then the turning point, I went back to Anglicanism, which had been my childhood faith beginning. I feel satisfied, and I got onto Newman. Right. And first the Apologia, then the development of Christian doctrine. And that finally convinced me that what I was looking for was the Catholic Church. And I met a priest in the Cotswolds there, and he said, "You must come over to Prynich Abbey." And I often feel it was probably the one place in England where I would really have found myself at home. And from the beginning I felt this immense attraction of that life at Prynich.
And having found yourself at home there, you began to feel influences very early from the East.
Yes, that took time, you know, I suppose, for 10, 15 years probably. I was absorbing Catholicism, Christian faith at a very deep level, as you get it in a monastery, you know, with all the chant and the prayer. And then I met a very remarkable woman, Toni Sussman. She was one of Jung's first disciples, practicing psychoanalyst, a Catholic who had also been initiated into yoga by a yogi in Berlin. And her husband was a Jew, and they came to England in the 30s and set up, she is a psychoanalyst, but had a little meditation center there. And for the first time, I discovered all these books on Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and all the rest. And then a new sort of journey began for me.
And at an important moment in that journey, you met an Indian Catholic priest, a member of the Syrian Catholic Church, the Church of St. Thomas in India.
Yes, he was visiting England and came to our monastery, and he wanted to start a contemplative monastery in India and invited me to do so. And after some time, at that time I wasn't available, but after some time I was able to get this permission, and we came out to India in 1955 together to start a contemplative monastery in the Benedictine tradition.
Yes, strictly.
Strictly, yes.
But then you moved to a monastery, an ashram it's called, which was much closer to the Hindu tradition.
Yes, well, we began to discover how very Western our Christianity and our monasticism was, do you see? And then we began to adopt the Indian customs with this kavi color. It's a sacred color in India, you see, and it's a sign of a monk. They call it a sannyasi in India, so we adopted this as our monastic habit. And then we began to take the ordinary Indian customs of going barefoot, sitting on the floor, eating with the hands. And so we developed a monastery, you could call it, a monastic tradition, but with Indian customs.
You say in one of your books that you've been living as an Indian among Indians, following the customs of and living as they do. Now, an ashram is sort of the Indian equivalent of a monastery, isn't it?
Yes and no. You see, it is an ashram is a place of prayer, but in the Indian tradition, it centers around a guru normally, a teacher, one who has some experience of God or experience of Brahman, they would say. And we, when we moved now from this ashram, Shimala in Kerala, to Tamil Nadu, where I am now, we were able to enter fully into this Indian tradition and adopt all these customs and to really to enter into the spiritual tradition of India.
Could you describe a typical day in the life of the ashram?
Yes, I would say the two pillars of the day, I like to call them, are the 2 hours of meditation, morning and at dawn and sunrise. In India, those are traditional times for meditation. So every day begins, usually about 5:30, with meditation. And then we have 3 times of prayer in common, morning, noon, and evening. Again, these are traditional Indian times. And we've gradually developed a kind of Indian liturgy. It's basically, we belong to the Latin Rite, as it's called in India, not the Syrian, which we had a lot. But we've adopted so many Indian customs, and we use Sanskrit chanting. We read from different scriptures in our daily prayer. We use psalms and Bible readings, and then we use these bhajan songs. They're very popular, simple repetition sometimes of the divine name. They call it Nama Japa. We use the name of Jesus, you see. And so we've developed really a kind of Indian liturgy, let's say.
Well, Vatican II radically changed the liturgy in the Roman Catholic Church, the form of the Mass, abbreviated the daily office and other things. Some of us from older traditions, such as the Orthodox Church, to which I belong, as you know, feel that much of the mystery was sheared away when these changes took place and the vernacular was introduced, and a completely new form of worship emerged. What is your feeling about that? Is it the same in India?
I think so. No, I think in the West many people do feel that. I think in India it's rather different. The Indian people have this deep sense of the sacred, of mystery. And in our own ashram, for instance, we use the Indian form of the Mass, which has been permitted both by the bishops and by the Rome, where we've introduced this element of mystery. And we have a very beautiful sanctuary with oil lamps, and the sanctuary is in the dark. You just have the one light in front of the sacrament. And so we're in an atmosphere of mystery. And then at the end of every prayer, we do what is called arati, which is waving lights in front of the sacrament. You light a camphor, and you have this flame, and you ring the bell, and you wave the light. And it's extremely moving as a way of worship. And
using Hindu forms for the adoration of the sacrament.
It's really used the Hindu form of worship, which is a normal in a temple, but adapted to Christian worship before the Blessed Sacrament.
In this community of prayer and visits by innumerable pilgrims and serious concentration on spiritual progress, do you read newspapers?
We do. I think it's very important for an ashram and a place of prayer to be aware of the conditions of life in the world, the conditions of our neighbors, for instance, the condition of the people of India as a whole, and then of the world. And actually one of the first things we did, and I've continued it ever since, was to take up a subscription to Time magazine. I found it takes in a short space, I can get the knowledge of what is going on in the world as a whole. And that is part of one's prayer, you see. Your prayer has got to be concerned with the whole of humanity. It's no good concentrating on yourself alone. So we take a daily paper and we read a magazine. I try to limit the time given to it.
But you're not living withdrawn from the world in that sense. You're very much a part of it, feeling it,
yes.
Sensitive to changes, interested in what's occurring in it.
Yeah. I remember one of your great Orthodox monks, Saret Siloran. He was a solitary member for years at Mount Athos. And he always said that he could not pray unless he knew he was praying for the whole of humanity. And I think you've got to have that feeling with the whole of humanity if you're going to be a genuine hermit.
What does the religion of India and traditional Christianity have in common? Surely you're in a kind of bridge situation with employing elements from both. What is the common ground?
Well, I think the common ground, is really this sense of mystery of the transcendent, that beyond the world of the sense, beyond the world of the mind, which so many people in the West think is the limit, beyond the mind is this world of mystery, of transcendence. And the whole movement of Indian spirituality from the time of the Vedas and the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita has been towards this transcendent mystery. And I think the Christian religion, and it's certainly true in the Orthodox Church, has this orientation towards an absolute, infinite transcendent, which for us actually is the Trinity, but it is the ultimate mystery.
Where would you say the two traditions differed?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and that is really what we're engaged on at present. Many theologians in India are weighing this matter. My own way of approaching it is this. I look on Hinduism and Buddhism and Oriental religion as a whole as cosmic religions. It is God's manifestation in the cosmos, in the whole creation, and in the human heart. And I think we'll find that practically all Oriental religion is this tremendously deep awareness of a presence in the whole creation, in every blade of grass, in the earth and the sun, the water, the fire, and everything around you, and in every human heart. And to discover that presence in the world around you and in your own heart, that is the search of the Oriental, and that, I think, is cosmic religion, you see, which is only Christian.
Yeah.
But what the Christianity introduced, I believe, or rather what the Hebrew, the biblical tradition introduced, was God's action in history. The action of God not only in nature and in the soul, but the history of a particular people, the call of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, the call of Moses, exiles and going back from Egypt to Palestine, the call of David, Solomon, then the call of the prophets, and finally the fulfilled revelation in a unique historic person and a unique historic event.
What someone has called the scandal of particularity.
Scandal of particularity. But I don't want to oppose those two. You see, I believe the cosmic religion is perfectly valid. God has been revealing himself to mankind, and this includes American Indians, Australian Aborigines, and so on. This cosmic revelation is all everywhere. But within the context of the cosmic revelation comes this particular revelation of its historical character centering on a historic person, you see.
You've written For a long time now, the West has taken the path of extroversion. We stand in desperate need of the opposite process of introversion, of intuitive thought and interior life, such as the East can give us. On the other hand, the East is now turning to our civilization and is in danger of losing its own roots and tradition. The meeting of East and West, which we have in mind, therefore, will be a return to what is deepest in their own traditions, the religion of their roots in the past.
Yes. And that, I think, applies, you see, to Christianity equally. We have to recover our roots in the Bible and also in the mystical tradition of the Church. And here again, I believe the Orthodox have a great contribution to make. You see, we have a wonderful mystical tradition in the Western Church too, but the whole mystical tradition needs to be recovered. And then we have to relate this mysticism in our own religion with this mystical tradition in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism, the whole Oriental religion.
By mystical tradition, you mean specifically what?
Transcending the senses, the imagination, and the mind, and experiencing what Dionysius the Areopagite called the divine darkness, is going beyond, you see, into the divine mystery. That is the
inability to describe God in any...
You cannot describe God in any words. No word and no concept can ever be adequately represent God, you see. And so words and concepts are necessary. The Bible is necessary, but they're pointers towards a mystery beyond the words and beyond the concepts. And that we have to recover in our tradition. And the Hindu and the Buddhist have that very firmly rooted in their tradition.
Well, it's very satisfactory to an Orthodox to hear you. We have a devotional practice, the Jesus Prayer, which is known to a great many Americans through some popular writings. But it's an old monastic devotional practice, and I think rather Oriental in its nature. And would you use that in your ashram?
Yes, actually, we make the basis of our meditation. You know, we use a yogic method in the sense that we make reference to the position of the body, simply to sit upright. You know. Like that is itself important. It harmonizes the body. And then the breathing, to harmonize the breathing. And then you have what's called a mantra, the name of God or some sacred words. And for us, the Jesus prayer, the name of Jesus or some formula around the name, is the mantra. And you repeat that mantra so that it focuses not simply your mind, but your heart, you see, on the divine mystery. It's taking you towards that world of mystery, you see, and transcendence.
You say that there are common elements in all the world's religions, and God is active where there are believing people, and perhaps even where there are unbelieving people. And you've written, the goal of each religion is the same. It is the absolute transcendent state, the one reality, the eternal truth, which cannot be expressed, cannot be conceived. This is the only goal not of religion, but of all human existence. All men are continually attracted to this transcendent truth. Now you're bearing witness to that conviction where you are. Does it have an influence on the Indian community?
Yes, it has a very deep influence now. You see, we have been brought up in the Indian church, like most Christian churches, was brought up to think that Hinduism was of the devil. It was idolatrous, superstitious, and had to be avoided at all costs. But since the Vatican Council, that has completely changed. We're open now totally to the values, the moral and spiritual values of other religions. And in our ashram, and now spreading all over India, there is this openness to the truth in the other religion, you see. That's what we seek.
Christianity actually began in the Middle East and moved westward. It's only in our day, really, and of course we can't discount the missionary labors that went before, but it's only in our day that we're actually confronting the Orient.
Yeah, that's what I feel. You see, the Christianity passed out of Palestine into the Greco-Roman world, and it developed this wonderful Greco-Roman tradition, and we're still living on that. Our liturgy, our theology, our canon law, the whole system is living on that, and only now, even in this present decade almost, or the last decades, are we beginning to confront the Oriental tradition, really to realize its values and to relate them to our own. And that is why I hope, you see, and I feel the hope of the future is that Christianity will cease to be a Western religion and will be able to incorporate within itself the values of the Oriental tradition, just as once before it incorporated Greek philosophy and Roman law and all that the West had to give. It has to take into itself, say not only Asia, but Africa, you see. The third world has this boldness to give to the church. We've got to be open to whatever they can give.
In an article you wrote, I think it was a paper you read at one of the Asian monastic conferences. I read it in Cistercian Studies. You point out the wide variety that exists in Indian religion, that it isn't as simple and as we normally suppose it. Isn't there in India a temptation toward syncretism, toward blurring edges, toward papering over the cracks, toward ignoring differences?
Yeah. That is the great problem. I think in the West we all see all the differences. In the East they see no differences. And again, a Hindu guru will say Jesus and the Buddha and Muhammad and Krishna are all the same, different names for the one. And that is simply to ignore differences which exist within the unity. There is a unity behind all religion, but it expresses itself through different traditions, and we must be faithful to our own tradition. Actually, I attended very, very early when I went to India in 1955. I attended a meeting of the Union for the Study of the Great Religions. It was founded by Dr. Radhakrishnan when he was in Oxford. And we had many of the leading leaders of religious life in India together. And the question came up there, you see, are we trying to mix the religions together or to find some religion which will bring everything together, or are we trying each out of the truth of our own religion to relate to the truth in the other religion? And that, I feel, is the future of humanity. A Christian must be faithful to his own tradition, and then he must open himself to what the Buddhist and even what traditional African religion has to say to him concerning Christ, concerning God, concerning his whole spiritual life, you see.
Then there would be a hospitality to ideas such as yours in India, yes, but perhaps a temptation to assume that they could become part of the general tradition without making any particular contribution.
Yeah, that is our real problem, how to find the middle position between rejecting all these other, making differences between religions and simply seeing all as the same. We've got to find this middle position, which is really a position of dialogue. You open yourself to the other, and the other must open himself to you, but you don't just mix your beliefs.
I understand that there are less than a dozen men in your monastery, and all the other monks are Indians.
Yes.
Where are they trained?
Well, at present we have to send them to seminaries to do philosophy and theology, which is not satisfactory, and I would hope in time it would be possible to train them in the ashram, though it also has advantages. They get in touch with other movements in the church, and not only in India but abroad, and they get perhaps a broader vision so that it has its own value. But the formal training in monastic life in the ashram itself is extremely important.
Yes. For many, many centuries, I suppose for Catholics with Francis Xavier, or perhaps even before, Christian missionaries went to India. We've had in our day the interesting experience of entertaining Oriental missionaries from India. You can hardly visit a good-sized airport in the United States or a bus or a railroad station without running into representatives of one or more Indian religious bodies. Some priests and rabbis and ministers consider this something of a danger for younger members of the synagogue or the church. How should we relate to this outreach from India?
Well, I think we have to face the fact, you see, that Western religion, in almost all its forms, has become rather extroverted. We have this tendency to social act, to congregational worship, to community, which is all good. But this inner life of the heart, this awakening of the heart to the presence of God within, is very little realized. And nearly all these Oriental teachers, some are good, some are bad, some are between the two, but they all, I think, have some message of interiority. They awake people to some extent to this within. And my impression is that the young people today especially cannot take this external religion, or at least many of them cannot. They have to find this presence within, and then, this has been our experience in the ashram, so many come to us, they're not practicing any religion, Jewish, Christian, or anything else, but when this awareness awakens within the heart, then the Bible begins to mean something to them, and the Eucharist, the liturgy begins to mean. So I think we've got to this interiority, and then all the rest will find its meaning.
In general, then, you would say that the presence of these representatives might be stimulating in a creative way in our American society.
I think it's a challenge, you see. I think it's a real challenge which we are not answering at present adequately, and I think we ought to face it.
Yes. You've been in America now for a short time. Do you feel it's a religious country?
I wouldn't like to honor my experience has been in monasteries almost exclusively, and they're certainly religious. But my impression in the monasteries, I think, is interesting, that they've been through very difficult experiences, and I found almost everywhere there is a religious awakening taking place, and an awakening to a deeper, more deep religious sense, and more the sense of a mystery of contemplation. So I found it very encouraging, actually, this experience.
Well, that's good to hear, and it's good to feel that somewhere in the Christian world, bridges are being built in a friendly way to establish fellowship with those who believe, and perhaps believe somewhat differently than we do.
And even to those who don't believe, you know, because it's present everywhere, you see. I think anyone who's human has this capacity within him.
With your permission, I'm going to conclude our reading a quotation from one of your books. Perhaps there is nothing which the Western world needs more urgently to recover than this sense of the sacred. In the West, everything has become profane. It has been deliberately emptied of all religious meaning. The West needs to learn from the East the sense of the holy, of a transcendent mystery, which is immanent in everything and which gives an ultimate meaning to life.